Well, happy Super Bowl Sunday and also Snow Day. Thanks for joining us online. What do you think the difference is between those people that are really fulfilled in life and everybody else? I want to say really fulfilled. I mean have a great and meaningful relationships, strong financially, generous with people around them. They're fulfilled in life. They just love what they do. What do you think the difference is between those people and the rest of the world? Those who are struggling relationally, those who are struggling financially and don't know if they can be generous. They want to be, but they just don't feel they could be. Those who know there's something more in life but can't just quite find it. Those who feel empty. What do you think the difference is then between those people and the people that are really fulfilled? Well, let me tell you what it's not. It's not their intelligence. It's not their talent. We've all seen smart people who are miserable, and we've seen talented people who are broke. I would say it all really boils down to their planning, their decisions, and their focus. These things are incredibly and indescribably important. The quality of our decisions and our ability to plan and to focus determines the quality of our lives. The problem is that most of us, we're really just not good planners. We want to do the right thing, but end up not often doing it. We want to plan ahead, but often end up doing things in the spur of the moment. We want to be focused, but we're so easily distracted. Many of us are afraid of making the wrong choices. And this is especially true for those of us that are Christians, because we don't want to miss out on God's will. And so oftentimes we'll end up over-analysing things. Well, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nicholas, one of the pastors here. And I know that I'm a victim to over-analysing. I'll spend hours analysing what is really a very simple thing. Something that in the scheme of things is inconsequential. I tend to try and think through every possible scenario. If this, then that. If that, then this. And I end up getting distracted from the bigger picture. So what do we do? Well, today we're going to continue our Crossroads series. A series where we're looking at making wise choices. We're at the crossroads. Which direction do I take? And we're going to meet a character from the Old Testament. And we're going to look at his story. And it's going to be an example for us when it comes to planning and focus. And there's one statement in this story that stuck with me through the years. And I hope that it will stick with you too. Remembering this statement has helped me avoid numerous potholes in life. It's helped me handle the busyness of my life. It's helped me to focus on the important and not just the urgent. And it's helped me to plan things, to make good decisions. So let's go to the Bible, to the book of Nehemiah. Now the story takes place in around 444 BC. Nehemiah was a Jewish exile who lived in Persia, and he served King Artaxerxes I. Little context to understand the significance of the story. When this story takes place, the nation of Israel, or the nation of Judea, is a vassal state. It has lost its sovereignty for almost 300 years. So for all that time, Israel is in total disarray. They're constantly under attack. Nations and armies are marching back and forth, raiding, stealing, taking whatever they want. And the people are trying to hold it together, but they have no sovereignty. The trouble started with the Assyrians. They conquered that region of the world. Then the Babylonians came along and conquered the Assyrians. And the Babylonians stormed the city of Jerusalem. They destroyed Solomon's temple and carted off the best and the brightest to Babylon, including the Fab Four from another inspirational Old Testament book, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel. Then eventually Persia conquers Babylon. Cyrus the Great, the Persian king or emperor, said to the Jews held captive in Babylon, if you want to go home, you can. You're welcome to leave. So consequently, several thousand Jewish people left that area and went back to Judea or Jerusalem. But many others actually stayed in what would then become Persia, because they'd grown up there. It was like their home. So now the nation is divided. The people that went back to the city of Jerusalem found it in complete disarray. Walls were torn down, gates were burned, temple had not been rebuilt. Things were really tough. So they did their best to put things back together. They rebuilt the temple, but not to a very high standard. It was like a sort of econo-temple, you could say. In fact, the narrative tells us that when the people who remembered Solomon's temple saw the new temple, they wept. Overall, economically things were bad, militarily things were bad, and it was still like open season on the Jews living in Judea. They were still under constant attack. And this goes on for almost 100 years. And we're going to pick up the story towards the end of this period. Nehemiah and most of his family never left Babylon. Consequently, over time, they'd become somewhat wealthy and well known. And Nehemiah became the cupbearer to King Artaxerxes. And while he's in this role, his brother, who had left Persia and lived in Judea, came to visit him. Nehemiah asked him how things were going back there. His brother told him that the people were not doing well and that everything was in a mess. He said that the walls of Jerusalem were broken and the city gates were burned. So here's this capital city with no walls to speak of. So many breaches in the walls, anyone could come and go. And for a capital city, this was really degrading. It's humiliating. Now, I was trying to think of a good example. And I remember when I went to give a presentation at a small college in New York. And I went to the men's room, and this is what I saw. Now, who would ever use that toilet? No walls, no privacy. It would be degrading and humiliating. Well, in a sort of micro way, this represents the whole city, the whole population. They couldn't keep people out of their city. They couldn't protect themselves from people in different areas. Now, when Nehemiah hears about this, he sits down and he weeps and mourns for days. And he couldn't get it off his mind. One afternoon, he goes to see the king, the most powerful person in the world at that time. And the king asks Nehemiah, "What's going on? You don't look to be your normal self." And Nehemiah said, "My people are in such bad shape back in Judea. The walls of Jerusalem have been torn down." Then he did something very, very gutsy, something dangerous, even bordering on crazy. He says, "Can I have some time off? Like a lot of time off. Can I leave your service, go back and help my people?" And the king says, "Yes." But the king gives him more. He says, "I'm going to make you the governor of Judea." Now we've got to remember that at this point, Judea was a vassal state of Persia. What that meant is that the people in Judea were paying a lot of money for protection. They basically had to do whatever the Persian Empire told them to do. So the king says, "I'm going to make you the governor, and I'm going to give you the resources you need to go back and to rebuild your city." Now this was a huge answer to prayer for Nehemiah. So off he heads. When he gets there, it's worse than he imagined. Walls are crumbled, everybody's depressed. And all the regions around there were taking advantage of everybody. So he does a recon of the entire area. And he pulls everybody together and he says, "Here's the problem and here's the solution. We're going to rebuild this wall." And he gives every family a place on the wall to work and assigns them a piece of wall closest to where they live and sends everybody to work on repairing the wall. Now, the people around there saw that Nehemiah had this plan in place. So they began to intimidate the workers. They attacked the families, and it got really bad. And Nehemiah had to stop the work and bring everybody in. He restructured it so that some people then would guard and others would rebuild. And it was all a bit of a nightmare, but the work continued day after day. But the ringleader of the opposition to the rebuilding was a guy named Sanballat. And Sanballat got desperate as he saw that Nehemiah was not going to stop construction. Now, this is not the first time that someone had tried to do a rebuilding effort, but this time it really was working. So Sanballat decides the only way forward is to kill Nehemiah. Let's pick things up in chapter 6 of Nehemiah by reading verses 1 and 2. When the word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Orno. So Sanballat was inviting Nehemiah for a chat. But Nehemiah saw straight through this. He knew that Sanballat was planning to get him isolated from the people and to murder him. And Sanballat sends messengers to Nehemiah. And this is where our key phrase comes in. I quote it to myself so often. Whenever I'm distracted, whenever I'm planning, whenever I've been tempted to opt for immediate over ultimate, or want now over value most, or optional over what is essential. As we continue the story, there's one more thing we need to know. When Nehemiah gave out the wall building jobs, he gave himself an assignment too. He wanted to lead by example. He decided, I'm not going to ask these people to do something I'm not willing to do myself. Even though I'm the governor, I'm going to get out there and work on the wall. So the messengers from Sanballat and his cronies came and they said they wanted to meet with Nehemiah. Picking it up in chapter 6, verse 3. So I sent messengers to them, saying, I am doing a great work so that I cannot come down. He says, I'm not coming down. I'm not stopping the thing that I am focused on. And then Nehemiah says the most interesting thing. He asks the messengers a question. Why should the work cease while I leave it and go down to you? Now the optics of this are amazing. Nehemiah is literally looking down at the messengers. And he says, why should I stop what I'm doing up here and come down to you? I'm up here doing what's most important, the thing that makes the most difference to the people who are most important to me. Why would I lower myself to do something or lower myself to something of less importance? It's a question we could ask ourselves. Why would I stop what I am doing? Why would I be distracted from my goal? We know what is most important, but we also know how easily distracted we can be. We know we need to focus on things. We know we need to focus on what God wants us to do, be that in our personal lives, our family lives, our dating lives, our academic lives, whatever it might be. We know. And we can ask ourselves, why would I come down from what's most important to me? So the messengers go back to Sanballat and tell them that Nehemiah is not coming to the meeting. Sanballat is really unhappy. And we see in verse 4 what he does next. He says, but they sent me this message 4 times, and I answered them in the same manner. Sanballat is committed to getting Nehemiah off the wall and to a meeting with him. And he sends messengers back with the same request 3 more times, trying to wear Nehemiah down. The messengers are like Nehemiah, just find an opening on your calendar. But this wasn't a scheduling conflict. It's not about scheduling. It's a priority conflict. There's always time to put the wrong thing on your calendar. We can always find time to squeeze that thing in, that thing that takes us away or subtracts from what's most important to us.
But Nehemiah was smart. He had pre-decided what was most important. Didn't check his calendar, didn't need to, because he'd already decided what's most important. So he tells the messengers he won't come down. I told you the first time. I told you the second time. I told you the third time. And I'm telling you the fourth time, I will not come down. Now again, we contextualize this for our own lives. In order to be focused on what's important, we might need to say no to some other things. Now, I'm not certainly saying we might never do these other things, although sometimes that's the case. It could be a no for now, but not forever. We have pre-decided to focus on the most important thing. And it isn't good versus bad. Many of the decisions we make are all mostly good. It's really more like wise versus unwise. And again, it isn't throughout our lives. It might be just through a season of our life. And think about it in the context of Nehemiah's story. If he had said yes to their invitation, Sanballat and his cronies would have killed him. And although the results aren't as extreme with you and me, there is a parallel. There are certain things that if we continue to say yes to, they'll kill our chances of experiencing the future we envisage for ourselves. Killing the chance for us to live out that calling that God has for us. And it's so important that we don't get distracted and we don't trade ultimate for immediate. But here's what I know about us all. We all have the opportunity to do great work. We're all writing a story of our life. And that story is a great work. And it's the only story we get to write. So we want it to be good. We want to write a story that we want to tell. Well, Nehemiah's enemies are relentless. They just won't give up. So they start rumors about him by writing an open letter to all the people, in essence to try and bribe Nehemiah. Let's pick it up in verse 6. In it was written, it's reported among the nations, and Geshem says that you and the Jews plan to rebel. Therefore, according to these rumors, you are rebuilding the wall, that you may be their king. And you have also appointed prophets to proclaim concerning you at Jerusalem, saying there's a king in Judah. Now these matters will be reported to the king. So come therefore, and let us consult together. So the rumor they start is that Nehemiah wants to be king. The reason he's fixing the city is that he's re-establishing Israel as a superpower, and he's going to get people to rebel against Persia. Now, Sanballat and the team start this rumor in the hopes that King Artaxerxes will get wind of it and bring Nehemiah back to Persia and off the wall. But Nehemiah is simply not fazed. Let's see what he says. He says, no such things as you say are being done, but you invent them in your own heart. He says, you can believe whatever you want, but it's not true, and truth will out. So he completely ignores the enemies. And they get more and more worked up. They decide to try and frighten him with another made-up story. We see in verse 10 what they say. Let us meet together in the house of God, within the temple. And let us close the doors of the temple, for they're coming to kill you. Indeed, at night they will come to kill you. This was their way to try to trick Nehemiah into acting like he was guilty of something, like a coward. Nehemiah ignores that as well. The text concludes with this. So the wall was finished on the 25th day of Elul, in 52 days. And it happened when all our enemies heard of it, and all of the nations around us saw these things, that they were very disheartened in their own eyes, for they perceived that this work was done by our God. They rebuilt the walls in just 52 days. Imagine doing that today. It takes months or years to get construction jobs done, what with delays, permissions, breaks, slow working. What Nehemiah did with the people of Jerusalem was truly remarkable. And when the people around there heard what had been done, they were afraid. They recognized that this work had been done with the help of God. Nehemiah knew that for him, in his heart, there was a thing he had to do, a job he had to complete, a project he must get to the finish line. People he had to love well. And regardless of the distractions, regardless of the criticism, regardless of the lies, regardless of the threats to him, he just had to be laser focused. He needed to do what he'd pre-planned to do. There's just dedication to a job. There's hard work, good leadership, confidence that God wired him to do this. And then there is success. All because he pre-decided what to do, and he stayed focused. And he was single-minded about it, focusing on that one thing. So we've seen today that there's real power in planning ahead of time, before we're in the heat of the moment, so that we don't have to make hasty decisions when we are in the heat of the moment. And our goal, with God's help, as followers of Christ, is to ask God to help us plan, focus, and make some pre-decisions. To plan ahead of time what we're going to do in the future, so that we honor God with the choices we have to make. And so one day, when we're tired and overwhelmed, or maybe when we're angry or emotional, or maybe when we're discouraged or feel depressed, we don't know what to do next. In that moment, we'll recognize that we're vulnerable. But the good news is that our plans will not be based on the emotion of a moment, but on the values God has placed in our hearts. Because when our values are clear, our decisions are easier. But it's still tough because we're just not natural planners, and we're often lousy decision makers. But the really good news is that we're not saved by the quality of our plans. We're saved by the grace of God through our Savior, Jesus Christ. And Jesus pre-decided in a garden called Gethsemane that no matter what came his way, no matter what price he would have to pay, no matter how hard it would be, and no matter what pain he would endure, he pre-decided, not my will, but your will be done. And he gave his life so that we can be made right with God, no matter what we did in the past. And so, because of that, because God loves us that much, what are we going to do? Well, we need to commit it all to him. We need to commit everything to God, and he will establish our plans. We pre-decide what we're going to do. So ahead of time, we already know, and that way we will honor God in the moment. We determine the course of action ahead of time so that we honor God in all that we do. So each week in this series, we've had a central question, and we've written that on our note card. And today, the key question I want you to write down and ask yourself is this: what's my wall? As you think about your life, as you think about your future, as you consider what's most important, what's your wall? What's the thing you dare not come down from until the work is done? What's the thing you have to stay focused on until it changes or until it's restored? Whether it's a week, a month, a year, or whether an entire season of your life, maybe it's that habit you need finally to break. Maybe it's that business you need to start. Maybe it's that relationship you need to rebuild. Maybe it's that debt you need to retire, that appointment you need to make. And then there's another part of the equation. A follow-up question is. And that follow-up question is this: what's distracting me? Because we know the answer to that one too, right? We know what needs to be done, and we know what we need to focus on. But we can look at our calendar, and we can look at our daily routines, and we know what is distracting us, what the obstacles are that we need to remove. So to put it all in action, we can ask ourselves one more question. What do I need to eliminate? I mean, there are obstacles, and then there's just some things, just some categories where we just need to say no. Maybe no to now, but not forever. Maybe during this season, and then pick it up in another season. Or maybe we do need to eliminate it forever. What do we need to eliminate? Is it cutting back on our TV watching or social media browsing? Is it that thing we're involved in that's just a time sink? Or maybe it's a case of who do we need to eliminate? Now let me be totally clear, not literally eliminate. I mean take off our schedule. That person who is keeping us from becoming who or what we want to be, that's just not a good influence on us. It's said that people that we mix with and listen to tend to determine the direction and quality of our lives. So maybe there's someone just during this season that we need to back off from because they're not giving us help to where we ultimately want to be. So we have plans to make. We have a story we want our lives to tell. And we want our lives to matter. We want to live out God's will for our lives. So if we have a story, and if we're going to make that story a story we want to tell rather than a story we don't, then we have to be focused. We have to plan out what we're going to do. Remember, we have a great work to do. So we say to ourselves, I'm doing a great work and I cannot come down. I'm doing a great work. I dare not get distracted. There are so many things I could do, and there are many things I can do. But what's the one thing I must do? So what's your wall? And are you willing to stay on it until the task is complete? You're doing a great work, so don't come down. Amen.